In the summer of 2010, a group of 5 friends from college decided to escape the bustling city for a weekend retreat in the woods. They had rented a cabin deep in the heart of the pine forest, a place that promised solitude and a chance to reconnect. Jenna, the planner, Mark, the skeptic, Lisa, the sensitive one, Tom, the jokester, and Sarah, the adventurous spirit, packed their bags and set off. The drive was filled with laughter and music, but as they entered the woods, a thick fog rolled in, blanketing the road and making visibility difficult. They joked about being in a horror movie, and Mark laughed it off. "Nothing's going to happen. It's just fog," he said, but his voice held a hint of unease. They finally arrived at the cabin, a rustic structure surrounded by towering trees. As they unloaded the car, Lisa felt a shiver run down her spine. "It feels strange here," she said, her eyes scanning the dim forest. The others dismissed her concerns, eager to unpack and settle in. Inside, the cabin had a warm, cozy feel, with a fireplace, old wooden beams, and vintage furniture. They lit a fire, made s'mores, and shared ghost stories, the atmosphere thickening with every tale. Jenna suggested they go exploring the woods the next day, and everyone agreed, excited about the adventure. That night, they settled into their rooms. Lisa and Sarah shared a room, while Mark, Tom, and Jenna took the other. As they drifted off to sleep, Lisa couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She glanced out the window into the darkness, but saw only the towering trees swaying gently in the night breeze. The next morning, they set out on their hike. The fog had lifted, revealing a bright blue sky. They wandered deeper into the woods, laughing and taking pictures. But as they ventured further, they stumbled upon an old, decrepit cabin that seemed to have been abandoned for years. Its windows were shattered and the door hung off its hinges. "Let's check it out," Tom exclaimed, his curiosity piqued. The others hesitated, but his enthusiasm was infectious. They cautiously approached, the floor creaking underfoot as they stepped inside. The air was stale, and a sense of foreboding filled the space. They found remnants of furniture, broken chairs, and dusty photographs scattered on the floor. One photo caught Lisa's attention. It was a picture of a family, their faces scratched out. "Guys, this is weird," she said, her heart racing. "We should go." Mark waved her off. "It's just an old place, nothing to worry about." As they explored further, they noticed strange symbols carved into the walls, spirals, runes, and unsettling faces. Lisa felt a cold draft, and a sense of dread washed over her. "I don't like this. Can we leave?" Just as they were about to head out, they heard a loud bang from upstairs. It echoed through the cabin, causing them to freeze in place. "What was that?" Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. "Probably just the wind," Mark said, though he sounded uncertain. They exchanged uneasy glances but decided to investigate. Cautiously, they climbed the creaky stairs, the air growing colder as they ascended. At the top, they found a small room with a dusty old trunk in the corner. "Let's open it," Tom said, grinning. "No way," Lisa replied, fear creeping into her voice. "What if there's something bad inside?" Ignoring her, Tom knelt by the trunk and opened it. Inside, they found old clothes, a rusted doll, and what appeared to be a journal. He pulled it out, flipping through the pages filled with frantic handwriting. "It looks like someone was going crazy," he chuckled nervously, but as he read a few lines aloud, the laughter died in his throat. The entries described a family tormented by strange occurrences, whispers in the night, shadows lurking, and a feeling of being watched. The last entry read, "They're coming for me. I can hear them. I won't let them take me." A chill ran through the group. "Let's go," Lisa insisted, her voice trembling. "Now." They hurried down the stairs, but as they reached the front door, it slammed shut on its own. The sound echoed like thunder, sending them into a panic. "What the hell?" Mark yelled, tugging at the door, but it wouldn't budge. "Guys, we need to find another way out," Jenna shouted. They dashed to a window, but it wouldn't open either. The feeling of being trapped clawed at their insides. Suddenly, they heard soft whispers like distant voices carried on the wind. Leave! 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 Stop it, this isn't funny, Mark shouted, his bravado crumbling. Do you hear that? Sarah cried, her face pale. It's coming from the woods. They all turned toward the sound, realizing the whispers were growing louder, almost beckoning them. In a frenzy, they searched for an exit, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. Finally, Tom spotted a small back door. They raced toward it, flinging it open and spilling into the forest. They ran, branches scratching at their skin as they stumbled through the underbrush. The whispers followed them, echoing in their ears, merging with the sounds of the forest. They could feel something chasing them, an unseen force urging them to return. Just keep going, Jenna shouted, leading the way. They finally reached a clearing, the cabin now a shadowy silhouette behind them. Breathless, they collapsed on the ground, trying to gather their wits. What just happened? Mark panted, eyes wide with fear. I don't know, Lisa whispered, trembling. But we need to leave this place. They made their way back to the car, adrenaline pumping through their veins. As they drove away, the whispers faded, replaced by the hum of the engine. But the sense of unease lingered. A few weeks later, as they settled back into their routine, Lisa couldn't shake the feeling of dread. She started having nightmares, waking up in cold sweats haunted by shadows and whispers. One night, she woke to find her bedroom door slightly ajar, an icy breeze wafting in. Is anyone there? She called, but only silence answered. That weekend, Mark invited the group over for a reunion. They gathered in his apartment laughing about their adventure. But as the night wore on, the mood shifted. Lisa shared her nightmares, and to her surprise, everyone admitted they had been experiencing strange occurrences, flickering lights, odd sounds, and a constant feeling of being watched. Suddenly, Tom's phone buzzed with a notification. He glanced at it, his face going pale. Guys, you need to see this. He showed them a post from a local news site. A family had gone missing near the woods of the abandoned cabin. The report detailed sightings of strange figures wandering the forest, whispering to anyone who dared approach. As they read the chilling article, the lights in Mark's apartment began to flicker. The air grew thick, and they all felt a sense of dread creeping in. What's happening? Jenna stammered, her eyes wide. We need to get out of here, Lisa said, voice trembling. Now! They hurried outside, but the streets felt different, shadows lurking in every corner. As they rushed to their cars, the whispers returned, faint but unmistakable, echoing through the night air. Come back. Come back. That night marked the end of their friendship. Each one went their separate ways, haunted by what they had encountered in the woods. Lisa moved away, hoping to escape the memories, but the whispers never left her. Years later, when she returned to visit her old friends, the cabin in the pines still stood, weathered and haunting, waiting for its next visitors. And deep within the shadows, the echoes of the past continued to whisper, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurked just beyond the light. The sun dipped low over the horizon as the Hughes family pulled into the quiet suburb of Maplewood. As they stepped out of their car, Sarah Hughes felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. They had left the chaos of the city behind for a fresh start, a spacious home with a backyard for their children, Emma and Noah. The neighborhood was charming, with tree-lined streets and houses that boasted well-manicured lawns. As they unloaded their boxes, Sarah noticed a pair of eyes watching them from across the street. An elderly woman stood in the yard of the house opposite theirs, her gray hair swept back in a tight bun, her face partially hidden by a lace curtain. Sarah waved, but the woman merely tilted her head, scrutinizing them as if assessing their worthiness. Mom, can we go explore? Emma tugged at Sarah's sleeve, breaking her focus. Sure, just stay close to the house, Sarah replied, glancing back at the woman who had now vanished inside. As days turned into weeks, the Hughes family settled into their new life. They enjoyed backyard barbecues and friendly chats with other neighbors. However, the elderly woman, Mrs. Larkin, remained a figure of intrigue. She was often seen at the window, watching with those same piercing eyes. "Don't mind Mrs. Larkin," said a neighbor named Tom one afternoon as they chatted over the fence. "She's a bit eccentric, lives alone since her husband passed, keeps to herself." Sarah felt a strange pull toward the woman. Was it loneliness? Curiosity? Whatever it was, she resolved to befriend her. One Saturday, Sarah mustered the courage to approach Mrs. Larkin's house. She knocked softly on the door, and after a moment it creaked open. "Hello?" Sarah ventured, peering inside. The air was heavy with the scent of old books and something sweet like lavender. Mrs. Larkin appeared in the doorway, her eyes narrowing. "What do you want?" "I'm Sarah, your neighbor across the street. I thought I'd come and introduce myself." Mrs. Larkin's expression softened slightly, but her posture remained rigid. "I don't need any company. Just wanted to say hello," Sarah said, forcing a smile. "Let me know if you ever need anything." "People always want something," Mrs. Larkin muttered, but as Sarah turned to leave, she added, "Come back tomorrow. We can have tea." The next day, Sarah arrived at Mrs. Larkin's house carrying a box of pastries. The old woman welcomed her in, the smell of lavender stronger now. As they sat in the dimly lit living room, Sarah noticed old photographs covering the walls, portraits of families and landscapes. "What a lovely collection you have," Sarah said, glancing around. Mrs. Larkin's expression hardened. "These are my memories. This house holds stories." As they sipped tea, Mrs. Larkin shared snippets of her life, mentioning a son who had gone missing years ago under mysterious circumstances. Sarah listened, her heart aching for the woman. "People say he ran away, but I know better. He was taken. Something lurks in this neighborhood," Mrs. Larkin said, her voice dropping to a whisper. As weeks passed, Sarah found herself increasingly drawn to the old woman's stories, but the neighborhood had a strange energy. At night, she often heard whispers echoing through her home. Emma and Noah reported seeing shadows moving past their windows, and Sarah dismissed it as their imagination. But then one evening, while putting the children to bed, Sarah heard a distinct knock at her front door. Heart racing, she glanced at the clock. It was just past midnight. She crept down the hallway, peering through the peephole. No one was there. The next morning, Sarah decided to confront Mrs. Larkin. "Mrs. Larkin, I need to know about the things happening in this neighborhood," Sarah pressed during her next visit. The old woman studied her for a long moment. "You're not the first to ask," she finally replied, her voice shaky. "There's a history here, dark, twisted. People disappear without a trace." Sarah's unease grew. "What do you mean?" "Years ago, there was a cult that thrived in Maplewood. They believed in sacrifices to appease dark spirits. My son, he was one of them. They took him and I never saw him again," Mrs. Larkin whispered, tears welling in her eyes. Fear gripped Sarah as she raced home, but the whispers grew louder that night. Emma and Noah's bedroom door creaked open, revealing dark shapes swirling around them. Sarah dashed in, scooping them up, and bolted outside. They stood in the moonlight, breathless, when Sarah heard it, a chorus of whispers rising from the street. Shadows loomed, shapes twisting and coiling like smoke. "Join us," they hissed. Panic surged as she ushered her children toward Mrs. Larkin's house. When they arrived, Mrs. Larkin was waiting. "You came. Good. We must prepare." "What do you mean?" Sarah demanded, her heart racing. "Tonight the spirits demand a sacrifice. We must confront them together," Mrs. Larkin explained, her voice trembling. "But what can we do?" Sarah felt the weight of despair pressing down on her. "We will summon them. I have something to show you," Mrs. Larkin said, leading them into her basement. It was filled with candles and strange symbols. With the children by her side, Sarah participated in the ritual, a desperate act of hope. They lit candles and called out to the spirits, demanding to know why they haunted the neighborhood. The shadows responded, swirling around them, a cacophony of lost voices. Suddenly, a figure emerged, Mrs. Larkin's son. His face was twisted in anguish, his eyes pleading for release. "Help me," he whispered, stretching his hand toward her. The ground shook as the spirits grew restless. "You cannot save him," they echoed. "No!" Sarah screamed, clenching her fists. We will not sacrifice anyone." In a moment of clarity, Sarah realized that love was the key. She reached out to Mrs. Larkin's son, filling her heart with compassion. "You're not alone. You were loved," she called out, her voice steady. The shadows hesitated, their grip weakening. Sarah's children joined her, chanting words of love and remembrance. "You're free. You are loved," they cried. As the power of their collective love surged, the spirits began to dissolve, releasing their hold on the neighborhood. Mrs. Larkin's son smiled, a peaceful expression washing over his face as he faded into light. The sun rose over Maplewood, casting a golden hue on the houses. The oppressive atmosphere lifted and the whispers faded into silence. Sarah, Mrs. Larkin, Emma, and Noah stood together, weary but triumphant. Mrs. Larkin wiped tears from her cheeks. "Thank you. You saved us." As Sarah looked around, she felt a sense of hope. They had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, united by love. The neighborhood would never be the same, but perhaps now it could heal. From that day on, the shadows that once loomed over Maplewood retreated, and the memories of those lost became a part of its history, a testament to the power of love, resilience, and the human spirit. In the heart of the Appalachian Mountains lies Eldridge Hollow, a town often shrouded in mist and mystery. Once a thriving community, it now stood as a shell of its former self, with crumbling houses and overgrown gardens. The townsfolk had long since vanished, leaving behind echoes of laughter and the faint smell of wood smoke. One chilly October evening, a group of college students decided to explore the hollow for their anthropology project. Among them were Jenna, the eager leader, Tom, the skeptical realist, Lisa, the sensitive spirit, and Mike, the jokester of the group. They arrived just as twilight descended, painting the sky in deep purples and blues. "Welcome to Eldridge Hollow," Jenna announced, spreading her arms wide as if presenting a stage. "Let's see what secrets it holds." They parked at the edge of the town, where the asphalt crumbled into gravel and the shadows of trees loomed ominously. As they walked down the main street, the air grew thick with an unsettling stillness. The only sound was the crunch of leaves beneath their feet. "Doesn't this place give you the creeps?" Mike said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Oh, come on, Mike," Tom replied, rolling his eyes. "It's just an old town. People get spooked too easily." They wandered past dilapidated houses, their windows dark and hollow like vacant eyes. The students took turns reading from their guidebook, which spoke of Eldridge Hollow's once vibrant history, a close-knit community torn apart by a tragic event. According to local legends, the townsfolk had been cursed after a series of mysterious disappearances, leading to fear and paranoia. One night, the entire town vanished without a trace. As the sun dipped below the horizon, they decided to set up camp near the old town square, where a weathered fountain stood dry and cracked. Lisa felt a chill run down her spine as she set up her tent. "I don't like this place. It feels wrong." "Stop being so dramatic," Tom said. "Let's just get our footage and leave before it gets too dark." Night fell quickly, and the students huddled around a small fire. Shadows danced among the trees, and the air grew colder. Jenna pulled out her camera to capture the atmosphere. "Guys, let's try to contact any spirits that might be lingering here," Jenna suggested, half-jokingly. A week later, back on campus, Jenna reviewed the footage they had recorded. But as she watched, her heart sank. The images from Eldridge Hollow showed their time there in stark clarity. Yet, at the edges of every frame, she could see dark figures lurking just beyond the light. Eyes glinted in the shadows, watching, waiting. One by one, the friends began to change. Tom became obsessed with researching Eldridge Hollow, spending sleepless nights poring over old maps and books. Lisa started drawing strange symbols, whispers of the town creeping into her dreams. Mike's humor turned dark, and he began to speak in riddles about the town's secrets. Jenna felt an unseen weight pressing down on her, an urgency to return to the hollow. One night, as Jenna lay in bed, she heard a faint whisper. "Come back. Come back." It echoed in her mind, a siren's call she could not resist, and deep within the shadows of Eldridge Hollow, the town waited, hungry for souls and ready to reclaim its own. As the moon waxed full in the sky, it would only be a matter of time before the friends found their way back, drawn by the haunting whispers of a town that would never let them go. "Great idea, let's summon a ghost while we're at it," Mike scoffed, but his bravado faded under the weight of the encroaching darkness. Lisa, surprisingly serious, pulled out a small Ouija board she had brought along. "I think it could be interesting, just to see if anything happens." With a mix of hesitation and curiosity, they gathered around the board, the flickering firelight casting eerie shadows on their faces. They placed their fingers on the planchette and took a collective breath. "Is anyone here with us?" Jenna asked, her voice barely above a whisper. At first, nothing happened. The board remained still, and the students exchanged nervous glances. But after a few minutes, the planchette began to move, sliding across the board with an unsettling ease. "Stop it, Lisa," Mike laughed nervously. "You're pushing it." "I'm not, I swear." Lisa's voice quivered as the planchette spelled out G-O. "Go?" Jenna repeated, intrigued. "Go where?" The planchette continued to move, spelling A-W-A-Y. The fire flickered violently as a sudden gust of wind swept through the square, extinguishing their flames. The students gasped, plunged into darkness. "Guys, this isn't funny anymore," Tom said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Let's just pack it up and go." Suddenly, a low, echoing whisper pierced the silence, sending chills down their spines. "Go away, go away." "Did you hear that?" Lisa said, her eyes wide. "We should leave, now." "No, wait," Jenna insisted. "We need to document this." Before they could protest, the whispering grew louder, merging into a cacophony of voices, each overlapping the other. They could hear phrases, "leave," "cursed," "lost." The words twisted into a haunting melody that enveloped them. Panic surged through the group. Mike grabbed his flashlight and aimed it toward the source of the noise, revealing nothing but the twisted branches of trees. "What the hell is going on?" In a frenzy, they stumbled back toward the old fountain, but as they turned, the landscape around them began to shift. The buildings, once standing proud in the moonlight, seemed to lean closer, their windows gaping like open mouths. "Run!" Tom shouted, and they bolted down the main street, the whispers following them like a shadow. They ran until their legs burned, dodging between the remnants of houses trying to find their way back to the car. But the layout of Eldridge Hollow felt disorienting, like a maze where the walls shifted with every step. No matter how hard they tried, they couldn't find the road. "Where's the car?" Jenna gasped, looking back at the town that now felt alive, pulsating with energy. "It was right here," Tom yelled, panic rising in his voice. "We should have reached it by now." Desperation clawed at their throats as the whispers grew louder, now mingled with distant laughter that sent shivers down their spines. Shadows flickered in the corners of their vision, darting just out of reach. "Let's split up," Mike suggested, his bravado fading. "We can cover more ground." "No!" Lisa shouted, her voice trembling. "We can't. We need to stay together." But before they could decide, a shadow moved in the darkness, and a figure emerged from the mist. It was an old woman, her face lined with age and sorrow, eyes clouded yet piercing. "Leave this place," she warned, her voice like the rustling of dry leaves. "You do not belong here." "What do you want?" Jenna asked, her voice shaking. "The town hungers for souls," the woman whispered. "It is not forgotten. You must go before it takes you." "What do you mean?" Tom pressed, his curiosity getting the better of him. "Once you enter the hollow, it is hard to leave. The town is alive, it remembers those who vanished, and it craves more. You must hurry, before the moon is full." With that, the woman turned and vanished into the mist. The students stood frozen, fear coursing through their veins. The whispers intensified, almost urging them to stay. "Let's go," Lisa said, grabbing Jenna's arm. "We can't wait." They ran again, adrenaline fueling their flight. They followed the faint outline of the road, desperately trying to remember the way they had come. Each shadow seemed to reach for them, and the laughter of the lost echoed around them. Finally, They spotted their car in the distance, headlights dim against the dark. They sprinted toward it, hearts racing, and climbed inside, locking the doors behind them. "Start the car, Mike," Jenna shouted. He fumbled with the keys, hands shaking. The engine sputtered, then roared to life. They sped away, leaving Eldridge Hollow behind, the whispers fading into the night. As they drove, a sense of relief washed over them. They had escaped, or so they thought.